Every business hits a moment where you're faced with a decision to pivot. Sometimes it shows up as an opportunity, sometimes it shows up as pressure, and sometimes it shows up as feedback you weren't necessarily expecting. But ignoring those moments, that's what actually holds businesses back. This podcast is no different. And as we've been building past the balance sheet, we've been learning in real time. And recently we got feedback that forced us to make a decision. Do we keep going the way we started or do we pivot? So we did. We ditched the scripts and leaned into more real, unfiltered conversations. In this episode, we're talking about why we made the pivot, what we learned from it, and how the same things show up in business. Because when you understand your financials beyond just the books are closed, you're able to make more meaningful strategic decisions, including when it's time to change direction. Let's dig in.
Alrighty, welcome back, friends. So in this episode, we're gonna switch gears a little bit. Since the last time we saw you and talked to you guys, we have gone live. So we have heard your feedback, and thank you to everybody who chose to come back. And just thank you so much for everybody's feedback and support for our first several episodes. And Cash, it sounds like we're hearing both very similar feedback. What I'm hearing is people want to get to know more about us and for us to just kind of jump straight into the meat. So, what do you say we kind of try that this round?
Yeah, I'm glad that you elaborated because we started this as a passion project. It was something that both of us really wanted to do as just something fun, almost like a hobby. I could count like 5 people in my sphere that I knew were going to listen. I think you had like 5 to 7 that you knew were going to listen. And in our first couple weeks, we have had almost 300 streams. So that is well beyond our few within each of our spheres. And the feedback that I got was that we don't give ourselves enough credit, that we do have a wealth of knowledge and we know what we're talking about. And some of the people that have given if feedback have been well seasoned, well respected people in the business world. And the other piece of feedback that I got was echoing exactly what you said, that they liked the beginning and they understood what the episode was going to be about, but they really really loved when we were in a collaborative conversation and kind of bantering back and forth. And so I think it will be really fun to see what the feedback is after this. I also just want to say to those that have given feedback, both Sassy and I have spent years in the corporate world. We have thick skin. We have heard things that maybe shouldn't be said to us. And you guys have been so gracious with constructive criticism, positive feedback. And I would just say that we welcome that. So please continue to give us this feedback, but continue with grace and respect.
Love it. I have you ever heard this song? I'm an accountant.
No?
My
Are you going to
step
sing it for us?
no, I will describe it. I was just gonna say, like, yeah, as a part of getting to know us, I think we should show people just how much fun we have doing
Mhm.
our job because, people make this claim or they just have this expectation that accountants are boring. And that's kind of what that song is. It's about this actor who basically doesn't want to do small talk with others, talking about how he can't get an acting job. So he says, I'm an accountant, to kind of shut up the conversation, because nobody then has a follow up, which to me, it's like the furthest thing from the truth because I find so much fun in accounting. And I kind of
Mhm.
feel like it's almost like forensics, right? Like a mystery that you're solving when you're reconciling something. So anyway, I hope that through our conversations, we can actually bring out how much our job really is fun.
Yeah, you send me the link and I'll have it added into the show notes so that not only can I listen to this song, but you can listen to this, that our listeners can listen to this song as well.
Totally.
Um, yeah, I think that our jobs are so fun. And to your point of us having so much fun, some of my closest, dearest friends are accountants. And I think that the mindset for us is, we're trying to get from point A to point B or Z. And a lot of times that gets mistaken for, bitchiness or introvertedness, which I would say that I am introverted, but we do like we are silly, we laugh, and I just think it's the way our brains are wired that we don't like small talk. Like the people
Mm-hmm.
that I keep in my circle,
Yes.
we're talking about, like, I don't care what the weather is. I can look at the weather app. I don't care, what color your car is. I want to go deep and have like intellectual conversations and like really kind of banter and almost disagree, which is probably a toxic trait of mine. But like I love like deep, meaningful conversations where, people are forcing me to critically think.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that having that brain, a lot of accountants have brains like that. And
Yes,
so
problem
small
solving brain.
talk and those hallway conversations just don't grab our attention. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm interested to hear this song. So, guys, for this episode, we're still going to stay kind of on a topic, even though we're going to try to move to this more conversational pace. This episode is avoiding the numbers is a leadership problem, not a math problem. And so we're really going to dive into how leadership matters, and you need to know your numbers, but you don't need to be in the numbers, and knowing the numbers allow you to make decisions strategically, and make them based on data while also leading people and enabling people to kind of rise through the ranks. So I think one of the first points that I want to touch on in this is so many business owners and business leaders that they avoid making decisions. And the reason they say that is, I don't know my financials. And I really think that at the core of that, it's an understanding issue. When I talk to business owners and business leaders, 95% of the time they are entrepreneurs. They started this business kind of as a passion project out of their garage or their basement. They never thought it would come to what it is. They have accounting software, but they don't necessarily know how to read their financials. They certainly don't know how to make decisions on their financials. They're making decisions based on their bank statement or their bank balance. And so they avoid some of these bigger, more strategic decisions that could propel the business forward because they truly don't understand the core of their financials. And so first kind of point here, and I have a business that I'm working with right now that they're teeing up for an M&A. They're looking to be acquired, and I've been working with them for a few months, and they're profitable. They by and large are profitable at the bottom, so that net profit, but their decision making when it comes to making decisions on the financials is a little weak. So what I mean by that is when they're making marketing decisions, it's kind of like, well, I've seen this business over here do really well with this type of marketing, so let's try it. Or I've seen businesses do their compensation structure in this way, so we're going to try it. The problem with this is that when they try this, they're not creating metrics,
Mm-hmm.
or they're not going back to their financials to really dive in and see, how did this marketing expense work for me, or how did it not work for me? And so I would love to hear a little bit from your perspective, how you've seen leaders or owners, kind of skirt around not making strategic decisions or big decisions because they
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily understand their financials, but
Mm-hmm.
that's not what they're communicating.
Right. So, yes, one anecdote that comes to mind is a couple of lifetimes ago, I was invited by the past boss, a good friend of mine, to clean up some books in the business which was one of his. Kind of one of his clients. It was his clients, one of their businesses. So in any case, they were it was in the mental health care kind of what's the word, industry, and specifically for adolescents. And essentially, I came into a situation where, business started really picking up. They were just a couple of years in, maybe even a decade into the business, but kind of hasn't really been, just kind of barely floating by, but starting to see growth. And growth really spiked in during COVID, because really that was, as we remember, a very big kind of shock to all of our systems, but specifically the kiddos of the world. They're such social creatures, and now everybody's on lockdown, and they have had a very, very hard time kind of navigating this life and world without their closest supporters, their friends. So in any case, the demand for mental health for adolescents just skyrocketed during COVID. And so their business, they didn't know how they were doing with the business, because their finance department was not developed, and they didn't know what they didn't know. They didn't know what workflows they should be working on. They didn't know how to structure the department. They knew there was cash in the bank, but there was only one bookkeeper, because she's been there since kind of day one, since they kind of were a very small operation. And so kind of status quo for many years. And so, but the need changed, and a lot of things just weren't done. And or when they were done, maybe 2 months afterwards, because in this situation, the sweet bookkeeper who was with them for many years, she was getting older and had health issues, and really was kind of doing them a favor by cleaning up the books, but really at her schedule at that time. And so they were always kind of in a lag of they didn't really understand how they did in not just prior month, but just how is their business doing in general. Because yes, there's this cash balance in the bank, but you and I know that just because there's cash in the bank, it doesn't mean that it's not already accounted for in some way, right? And so they were just kind of stalling and kind of like, okay, well, we're floating, we can pay our bills and stuff, but we really need to clean this up. And when I had a chance to clean everything up and create workflows that didn't exist, that where we could easily follow, every client from day of admission, and their petty cash account, and their out of pocket, what they owe, and all of that, just their whole scenario, we were now able to follow from admission to post discharge, where that visibility was never seen before. But larger than that, they finally understood that not only were they doing well, they were doing exceptionally well. And this opened up their eyes to the fact that they should be selling. And so they did. We went through a whole workflow where they were now in a position where they could decline offers, because they knew that they were so good, and they had, they got to pick their favorite essentially in the end. So this example just kind of illustrates the opportunity cost that you might be sitting on if you don't understand that you're actually doing well. Maybe it's not bad news.
Yeah, I also think that, for one of the things that I see too is a lot of owners that will say that, we were doing really well in January and February. Now we're in March, it's a little slow. And so then I ask questions like, well, what has January, February, March been in previous years, right? You're instantly looking for patterns.
Yep.
And so I would say that's also a frustrating thing from my side, is when the financials are avoided, you miss those patterns. And so my husband and I own a couple businesses, and one of them is in the auto industry. And essentially what we do is we work with body shops or collision repair shops to recalibrate the cameras on your car. So if you think about like your lane assist or your front camera, your backup camera, every car has a camera. As it's actually legislation as of 2026, every car manufacturer 2026 and beyond has has requirements, certain cameras that are required on those vehicles.
Mhm.
So he works with these body shops to recalibrate after they've been repaired. And we know for at least our location, our geographic location, that um, June through kind of August is pretty dead, almost
Mhm.
very little income. But we also live in the desert. So those months were over 100. I mean, even when the sun goes down, it's still 90 degrees. So we started to learn those patterns, right? Like
Mhm.
we don't freak out when June comes and revenue is down or
Mhm.
decreased. And we also see kind of a lull in November and December. Again, not completely gone, but people are putting money into the holidays versus their vehicles.
Yeah.
And so for us, we started seeing this pattern. You know, the first year was like, oh my gosh, are there relationships that are not being
Mhm.
stewarded? You know, is there another competitor in town that we're competing against? Is our pricing not off? And then year two, we saw the exact same thing, you know. It
Mhm.
started to taper off. And so now we're 5 years into this business specifically. We now know that when July comes, revenue is going to start to decrease, but it also allows us to plan, right? So in January, February, March, April, when revenue is high, we know that those funds coming in for those 4 months also have to help get us through the 3 months where revenue is going to be low. And so you start to see these patterns is kind of the overarching theme that I'm trying to communicate to our listeners here is you see these themes, and so the stress diminishes. I know now in July that I don't need to freak out. It's going to tick back up in September, and it can be said about almost any industry. The seasonality is different, and we can also look at it in sales cycles, right? I came from the manufacturing world, and we worked B2B, and we worked in with very large MOQs. And so we were selling, you know, truckloads of product, and the sales cycle was very long. Like I'm talking anywhere from 90 to 180 days from talking to the customer or client
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
actually closing the deal. And so you can take into account those trends of it's going to take me 3 to 6 months to close this deal. So the
Mhm.
revenue is going to be slow. So eh, I want to challenge our listeners to you don't have to do the math. You don't have to be in the financials, but understanding the trends, understanding these patterns, they can eliminate stress and they can help you make better decisions. I know in July, I'm not going to hire an employee for our business.
Mhm.
Um, and so knowing them at that very high level helps make some of those bigger decisions.
Yes, and you touched on some really good points there as far as like what I know that some you probably have experienced this in your past as well, but one thing, kind of one stall that I see with some business leaders is like, okay, when they get financials from their accountant every month, they don't like really know what to do with them. They don't really know how to kind of okay, so like, is this good, is this not? And so you touched on some, you know, good things that you can start thinking about, like if you're just handed a set of financials and you're like, how do I interpret this? Well, you need some sort of a baseline, right? And so you touched on trends, like, okay, so we have operated the first 12 months this way. Okay, great. Like, is this a blueprint for the next 12 months, or are there outliers here that I'm not going to expect in the following month? So kind of breaking apart, trying to essentially, when you're looking at one set of financials, you're not going to have the context of if it's good or not. When you're starting to compare things either against like the industry baseline or against, you know, even prior month, prior season, that's when you're really starting to understand some of these nuggets that will help you make your decisions. And I do want to say that, this is where business leaders, this is where your CFOs are your kind of right hand in understanding this. We don't expect you to, put A and B together. And I think a sign of a really strong CFO is when during week, or I probably would say monthly or quarterly discussions about operations, where we kind of we do the interpretation for them, we do the analysis, we throw in a couple of KPIs, but then we're like, this is what that means, and this is these are now your choices, this is what it means about your performance, and now you have these choices to either keep it going or to improve it.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that because I with my CFO clients. So my firm, we do everything from bookkeeping to fractional CFO work. I know we've talked about this in previous episodes, but I want to touch on it again. A
Mhm.
bookkeeper is at its core data entry. And I say that with all of the respect in the world because without a good bookkeeper, I can't do
Yeah.
what I need to do well and accurately. And so a bookkeeper is data entry. They are taking the past and making sure that it is in the system accurately, making sure
Yes.
that there are no duplicate transactions, making sure that the transactions are categorized accurately. And by accurately, I mean in a way that makes sense to the business owner.
Mm-hmm.
Some
Mm-hmm.
businesses can bucket everything into marketing, and some need to know this is what went to advertising, this is what went to digital design, this is what went to the website. It's all marketing, but different kind of buckets. So accurately means that it makes sense to the particular business. A controller is kind of the middleman. They're looking at right now, like what are we doing right now, and the CFO is analyzing and looking forward. They're saying
Yep.
this is what you've done, this is where we're at, this is where we want to go.
Yep.
And so
Exactly.
where I really like to operate, and my favorite clients are the CFO clients. And all of my clients, we do what I call an executive summary call every month. And so the first 10 days is really the bookkeeper's time to shine. They're making sure that they have the statements, making sure that things are accurate, doing the reconciling, making sure that the balance sheet is clean, that the P&L makes sense, that there is nothing bucketed into suspense or ask my accountant. And then it's coming to me to now start to look at this is what we did last January versus this January. This is what we did last year to date versus this year to date.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go into that call with the business owner and I give them that information. Here's your gross margin. Here's your net margin. This is what this means. Some of them are very quick for those entrepreneurs that have been in business for a while. Some of them you can just see, like I can
Mm-hmm.
read this myself, but it is a requirement of all my clients that they have to do that executive summary call with me. And some
Yes.
of them really take that to heart. Like she's giving us this time and she's answering our questions regardless of how foundational they are or not. But I love it when business owners invest in understanding. They don't need to be in it. I will still continue to do that information and feed that information to them.
Mm-hmm.
But when they can understand at the core, they can then make better decisions. And those questions also get better as far as they move from how much did we spend in marketing to what was our ROI on this spend, or should we renew this marketing spend? So
Mm-hmm.
a huge thing that business owners should know, that forward forecast, budget, strategic kind of mindset information is not expected from your bookkeeper. So if you have a good bookkeeper, you've been with them for years, please don't listen to this and then go back and make these expectations of them, because that's not what a bookkeeper does.
Exactly. And yes, you touched on a really excellent point. Like, yes, so uh, I want to touch on a couple of things. So, yes, business owners, please, please, please do not bog down your bookkeeper with these almost philosophical questions, if you will, because you're really not doing yourself or them any good. You're just bogging them down. You really need somebody who can somebody experienced who can take this data and apply it and give you the recommendations that your business needs. It's not a fair ask of your bookkeeper. They have talents in different areas, so this is where, like, if you are starting to ask those kinds of questions as a business leader, that's a time that you should be considering talking to at least a fractional CFO. You might not afford or really need one full-time in-house, but you need to have these kinds of conversations, these forward-thinking conversations. So with that, you touched on the importance of those monthly that monthly cadence with your CFO, kind of, how am I doing? How did I do last month? What should I be doing differently? And to your point, certain clients will kind of, if it's kind of business as usual and they're not really planning to do anything different, and those conversations are very short. But I have a client who's very, very involved and wants to understand these weekly KPIs. So I'm actually working on producing dashboards for them to take the overall goals that we have for this year that came from the analysis of their prior year's performance, and now applying them to weekly and monthly workflows, so they can kind of assess if they're doing better and actually attempt to do better. So, for example, we've determined that they have their kind of 4 big areas to concentrate on to see improvement and to see success is revenue growth, inventory efficiency, the reduction of underbillings, and to have consistent profitability. So, okay, sounds, nice and simple on paper, or maybe, to the project managers, now they're like, okay, how do I translate this to my people on the ground? Like, that doesn't mean shit to, an installer. Like, okay, what does that mean? And so this is where then I help to break things down of like, okay, well, for revenues, we want to make sure that it's above your break even floor, and definitely above your break even floor, because you're trying not just to remember, we discussed in prior episodes that profitability on your P&L does not equate to you being able to afford to pay all your bills. Not all your bills are nicely laid out on the P&L. So so I'm telling them specific things like this thing is a win, this thing is a fail. So we need to keep our revenues above the break-even floor. Okay, that hits one of the goals. Okay, we need to see an improvement in our gross margin of at least 1% to 2% overall to see a grandiose a lot better performance. So that's a thing now that we're tracking. Okay, how did we do from last week? Did we improve marginally? Did we not? Inventory growth or just inventory efficiency, we're measuring, are we ordering materials too often, where we're not selling them enough, and we need to stop. So we have these, it's with my help of, okay, these are our goals, but now these are the levers, these are the things you're going to see in your business that will help measure if we're winning or if we're losing in this in this measurement.
Yeah, I love that you brought up KPIs, because KPIs are so important. But I so often see business owners, I call it paralysis by analysis, because they have 7,000 KPIs, which at the end of the day, they can't hold accountability to all of these KPIs. And so they end up looking at 3. And what happens with that is that, our teams, one of my favorite sayings is the fish rots from the head down. And I think I've said this in previous episodes. If the business is failing or a department is failing, you must first look at the head of that department, right? Because 9 times out of 10, the responsibility falls there, and that's the root cause. And so if you have 7,000 different KPIs and you're really only truly measuring 3 of them, what your team is seeing is that meh, KPIs don't really matter because
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we have these 7,000, but we're really only doing these. And so it's not only important from a business standpoint to pick the KPIs that work for you. So some businesses, our KPIs were gross margin and net margin. It was so important to bring those up because they eventually wanted to get to the M&A table, and there has to be some level of profitability. And so we were really focused on that and found levers to raise those. Like you said, gross margin, net margin, those were the goals. Now, operations, marketing, finance, sales, they all had one or two KPIs that contributed to those two overarching company KPIs. But, you look at manufacturing, they're looking at inventory, right? They don't want to hold inventory for longer than they need to. They need to make sure that they have enough so that the turn is the inventory churn aligns with the customer pull. So you have to look at your business, and every business is different, and what does the business need, and then working backwards departmentally. And you need to pick, I would say, no more than 5
Mm-hmm.
for the company and then department, but really like three that are really going to move the needle for the business
Mm-hmm.
and the department. And then that is gold. Like, those are the goals, those are the metrics you follow, those are the metrics that you measure, those are the metrics that you hold people accountable to. And if you don't make them, it's also not the end of the world, right? It's now we have something to measure. We didn't
Mm-hmm.
make this. Why did we not make it?
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to go at this for another quarter, but maybe not be as aggressive? So I think what I'm really trying to say here is that really good leaders pick few KPIs that are very meaningful, and it shows true rapport and respect and really good leadership at the end of the day with those that you're stewarding.
Right. And if that you're consistently measuring them and not just giving up, because that's
Mm-hmm.
another, way that you could go is, oh, we're now focusing on all these fancy KPIs and then, drop it in 2 months because it was too hard to actually put them together. So yes, keep it simple, keep it few, but then keep them consistent. So you're learning about your business. That's a wonderful point. I do want to kind of transition into, we talked about setting these goals and having these KPIs that you're measuring. But I would love to hear some of your experience with some of these systems that I have to be honest, I'm so judgy about. Like, I've just seen them, I've seen them not work. And so I want you to tell me, like, bluntly, like, with, yes, there's this hardships to them, but like how you have seen them work. So like, for example, you talked about the like level 10s or whatever in one of your, and I have to say, like, yes, I do have general respect for these kinds of programs because business leaders need like direction of, how do we like set goals up? And then how do we make sure that our employees know what our goals are? And then they can kind of strive towards them in every week and every month. But so on paper sounds great, right? But like how I've seen it play out with businesses is like they have these really like wasteful meetings where they're spending either like 2 full days of operations, all operations stall, they're making these like philosophical goals, they punish each other like by like not fulfilling every goal. Like I have seen you didn't mark, like you didn't accomplish all 5, now it's like a failure or something. Well, one of those clients was just kind of ruled her domain in a different style, so that I think that adds to the component. But essentially I've seen it kind of more deter and stress people out, and like, oh my god, I didn't hit my goal. And a lot of people like in the last minute, like, oh shit, I have like 2 more goals that I didn't hit, how do I represent that I hit them? I'm gonna get my ass chewed out in this like monthly meeting or whatever. And then I've just seen also a lot of this time kind of spent on these are our goals and talking about our goals, and it's all talking about our goals, but you're not actually like moving any needle. And so maybe it's like, maybe they didn't plan out all the to-dos within a goal. Like, I don't know, I don't even know what the hell that system entails. So like, if you can, try to sell it to me, because
Well, here's the thing. As soon as you said at the beginning of this whole question, this is probably like what our listeners were waiting for. For those of you that listen on YouTube, my husband tells me all the time, like, the subtitles on your face are coming out. You need to put them away. Because if I, first of all, I don't beat around the bush. I just really don't beat around the bush. And I think that's why my people really like me, and why my people that are not my people actually really just hate me. But I think that that's something you and I appreciate about each other, is that there's no beating around the bush. And for those of you that watch on YouTube, if I don't agree with something, you will see it on my face. So, so, here's the interesting thing. I'm going to answer this in two ways. When you look at systems like this, because I'm not going to sell you on this, I think that at its core, I believe in it. Like, it is trying to put structurally into place this idea of this is what the business needs to do, right? Like, these are our 3 to 5 goals, and then the core from there. So EOS, that's what I'm very familiar with. It's entrepreneurial operating system. At its foundational core, if it is used and accountability is really in place, it can move the needle. But what I have found is that you look at the business of the 40,000 foot view. Like, what do we need to do in this next 90 days to really move the business forward? What would success be in 90 days if we looked back? And you pick 3 to 5 goals that would really move the needle. And like I said, those can be something like, we need to increase gross margin by 5%. We need to decrease our inventory hold time by 2 days. We need to drive 2% in ROI on the marketing side. So you come up with these very broad goals. Then you break them down into the departmental side. And okay, if we're going to increase gross margin by X amount, what does operations need to do? Okay, well, COGS is a huge factor here. So procurement, you need to really leverage our diversification in goods, and see if we can drive down pricing by kind of vetting our vendors against each other to drive pricing down. Production labor, that's also a lever of COGS. How can we get efficient with that? Can we either push more product through in the same amount of time, or can we pull someone off the line and do it with less people? And so you start to work it backwards. But what you explained is exactly what happens, is that you spend these 2 days looking at the goals that are really going to push the business forward. Everyone's super excited. Like, yes, we're going to do this in the next 90 days. And then over the next 12 weeks, you're supposed to come to the table and say, all right, these are my goals for this week. These are my goals for this week. But the reality is we don't live in this cookie cutter perfect world, and things go on, and we are in the trenches during the day. And so the goals go by the wayside. We get to the end of the quarter, and like you said, either we didn't accomplish anything, or we didn't accomplish it like we did. And there's not necessarily a focus on the things that went really well. And so I think what I got out of it is that goal setting, right? Like, what can we do to really push the business forward? And doesn't need to be very rigid. But on the flip side, I had a very similar conversation this week about, you might have some opinions on this too. I'd love to hear them, because I also know the subtitles on your face can't be hidden either. So, when I'm a huge reader, I love to grow. And even through my career, I have a bachelor's, I have a master's, I've sat in big seats, but I still want to learn and grow from those around me. I want to continue to read and see what others are doing differently, and really dive into that critical thinking. And I don't know what is kind of leveraging this, if I've put it into existence, but I have a couple clients right now that are really in the thick of reading Profit First. And At the core of Profit First, I agree with it. I agree with the fact that um, there should be money left over. I agree heavily on the fact that tax is thought about throughout the year and not this like secondary thought at tax time, and you get a bill for $20,000 to the IRS and $10,000 to your CPA, and you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay for this?
Mm-hmm.
It really drives this idea that you should be putting 20% away every single month for tax. And then it's not a surprise. Here's where Profit First really breaks down for me. There's seasonality, right? Like I can't put 20% of my income away in my husband's business July, August, June, July, August. It's not
Mm-hmm.
feasible. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
it's not realistic. 20% would not keep the business open during those months. So in those months before, I put a little bit more away to account.
Mm-hmm.
And the other side of this that I don't agree with is this excess money that's just sitting there. It's wasted capital. It could be reinvested in a way that is meaningful to the business. And so, long story short, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of opinions on my opinion on this, but the long story short to what I'm trying to get at in all of this is that when you read these things, when you see these systems that come out or become major trends, look at the foundation. Like what is the goal of it? In EOS, the goal is really goal setting and accountability. In Profit First, it's tax planning and you know paying yourself as an owner. You should get paid, and so it's really kind of those simple things of making sure you can pay your taxes and making sure that you didn't just create another job for yourself. But the rigidness is where it breaks down for me. In not every business is 20% in profit, 20% in tax, and 60% in expenses. Like I
Mm-hmm.
wish it was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then when you look at systems like EOS, there are some companies that I've gone into and they have a team of rock stars. Like you don't have to tell them. You tell them the goal and they will do whatever it takes to get to their goal because they are so bought into whatever the Kool-Aid is in that business, which is
Mm-hmm.
great. But then I walk into other businesses and they have a team of people just collecting a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where those systems break down for me. So I don't know if I fully answered your question, but
Yeah, you
that's
did.
my opinion.
I'm not sure if I should jump in more. I think I want to leave the EOS bandwagon and revisit. You talked about kind of the concept of profit only kind of mentality, and also like cyclicity and keeping enough padding. That you're not going to have predictable cushions every month, and kind of planning around that. And what kind of flew into my brain was definitely like, yes, that's a very realistic thing for all businesses. Is like there are slow months, there are the seasons that you're waiting for. And so some things, I know not every business is able to do this, but this is where you really need kind of padding and preparation from different sides. So like one of them is cash reserves, right? Like, so you want to be, to your point, you have dry months, you don't have 20% to put away. And so you kind of allocate it in the months that you can. And so, there's a little bit of cash gymnastics that you have to do to make it stretch. Additionally, if you're in a line of business where you can essentially kind of yes, you might have a slow season in this aspect of the business, but there's something else that you can sell as well, that, it doesn't matter. Like it's demand is there for it all year long. Or so finding kind of lines of extra streams of income into your business that align, that are very similar, kind of complementary to what you already do. And kind of offer those services to try to make up for those. You don't want to have to put all this pressure on your more profitable months and the more reliable months to then just be kind of fully spent in the dry months, right? So you want to kind of add that variability. And another point is like kind of on the same point, but just also a very different way of looking at your business model. I know this one business that essentially they have almost an unprofitable side of the business that they are, or just like super thin margins. And they are so okay with that. And they utilize it as a, like, yes, this part is not making us any money, but once those clients are already using this tool, they will be, this other thing that is lucrative that they will be enticed to use because they have to, because they're now in our environment. That's where we make the big bucks. And so it's such a brilliant way, because like the thing that's very thin margins, it's like the volume actually kind of makes up for it as well, but it's not their hardcore thing. It's just something that helps bring in, this other enticing part of the business. And so just kind of making a point of the different layers of revenue streams that you can place into your business, but also having some cash padding for when you can't make it happen during those dry months.
I agree with that. And I think, one term that I used in kind of the realm that I came from is creating profit centers. You want to create profit centers, and some profit centers are more advantageous than others. And what came to mind, and we haven't really touched a lot on this industry, but I do have a few clients in the restaurant industry. And so food cost is a huge situation for them. And specifically a pizza shop comes to mind, right? They have pizza that they make. That is their core operations, their core revenue stream. But they bring in, they have coolers that they sell soda out of, and they have like a case where they now do salad and breadsticks and things like that. And they created these. They're not super profitable streams, but what they found was they were listening to their customers, and we're picking up pizza and now we have to go to the store because we're getting soda and a salad. And so they found this way to create this profit center to create efficiencies for the customer. And they see maybe their pizza revenue go down a little bit because it's absorbed by the cost of the salad or the cost of the soda, but the overall revenue went up. And so those are trends going back to kind of the beginning that you can look at. And, they did 100,000, this is totally ambiguous numbers, but maybe they did $100,000 in, gross revenue just doing pizza at a 15% margin, but by adding salad, soda, breadsticks, they're now doing 150,000 with maybe a 10% margin. And so it's not always the best. Maybe that dip in margin doesn't make sense, but you now have more buy-in, and the customer is now giving you their business for the soda instead of going to Albertsons or Safeway or whatever your local neighborhood grocery store is. But I think that kind of in itself sums up this episode. And when you have a leader, whether it be a CFO or an owner that really understands their financials, they can start to make these decisions on, does this make sense to bring in a soda stand? Does this make sense to bring in this new inventory item, or does it make sense to buy it this soon? You can start to make these really educated strategic decisions that most often propel the business forward. in ways that you can't imagine. And so that's understanding those financials at a deeper level. Is there anything else you want to add before we land the plane here?
I don't think so. I think we touched on a good high level. I do want to kind of make a statement to our audience on just some things to expect from us in the future. As we ourselves have had a chance to listen to our past episodes, I have to say I haven't laughed so hard at myself for so like the first 10 minutes. I was just like, I can't, oh my God, I can't hear myself. And I just, after 10 minutes, I'm like, okay, get over it. Just listen. But anyway, there's so much added anxiety now after having heard our episodes, because there are certain thoughts where I'm like, oh my goodness, I may have confused our audience because I didn't fully elaborate on a concept. And now I'm feeling like I'm giving misleading information. So anyway, to kind of, mitigate the anxiety level for everybody, and also just because we have touched on some terminology in kind of in passing without really going into depths of things, I do want to reassure our audience that we will spend good episodes really delving into just the fundamentals of businesses, of financials. I'd love to spend an episode, just talking about like what the heck is a balance sheet, like really, not just like what's on it, but like what does it mean to a business owner, and and same with P&L and cash flow. So I want to delve into all of those in a lot of detail and just kind of let our audience know that it's coming. We'll get to touch it all.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said. I do also really appreciate all of the feedback that we've gotten. I've gotten some really great feedback on some things that you guys want to hear. So please continue to send in and share with us what it is that you want to hear. We're doing this kind of to help you guys and your businesses and your leadership to avoid the mistakes that we made, so that you can go make your own mistakes. You will make them, and we encourage you to make them. That's where you learn. But we really want it to be relevant to you. So if there's something that you guys want to hear about, please share it with us. And for those that you have shared, we have added it to the queue, and we'll be talking about it in the coming months. But we are very excited to have this pivot of a more conversational episode. We hope you really enjoyed it, and we will see you next time for episode 8.
Thank you, team. If this conversation resonated with you, take a second and ask yourself, where in your business are you being asked to pivot but are avoiding it? Because the longer you wait, the more expensive that hesitation becomes. If you found value in today's episode, make sure you're following Past the Balance Sheet so you don't miss what's next. Share this with someone who's in a pivot moment right now. Chances are they need to hear it. And if you're willing, a follow, a like, or a quick rating goes a long way in helping more business owners find these conversations. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time, Past the Balance Sheet.